New mom gets too real about postpartum recovery workouts. She stood in front of the mirror at 4 in the morning, still wearing yesterday's shirt, holding a resistance band she'd ordered 3 weeks ago but never opened. Her reflection looked tired not just physically, but in a way that went deeper. Something about motherhood had changed everything, including the body she thought she knew. Most new moms don't talk about this part. The part where you're told your body's miraculous, but you can barely recognize it. Where everyone says be patient, but nobody mentions how long patient actually takes. She wanted to feel strong again, not for Instagram, not for anyone else, just for herself. But every attempt at working out felt like a betrayal of her exhausted body. The first time she tried a postpartum workout video, she lasted 11 minutes before her pelvic floor reminded her that nothing was the same. The instructor smiled through burpees while she sat on the floor, confused and a little defeated. Why did everyone else seem to bounce back while she was still figuring out how to sneeze without crossing her legs? But what happened over the next 6 weeks changed everything. She started researching not the fitness influencer kind of research, but the unsexy, scientific kind. Postpartum recovery isn't about motivation or discipline. It's about understanding that your body just performed an Olympic-level feat and needs actual rehabilitation, not punishment. The abdominal wall has separated. The pelvic floor has stretched beyond what seems possible. Hormones are still rewiring your entire system. This isn't weakness. This is biology. Researchers at the University of Michigan found that nearly 60% of postpartum women experience diastasis recti, separation of the abdominal muscles, yet most don't know it until they try to do a crunch and something feels fundamentally wrong. The gap can be 2 finger widths or more, and traditional core exercises can actually make it worse. She measured hers one morning and found a 3-finger gap. No wonder everything felt unstable. Part of her still doubted it could work. This idea of gentle strength training with bands, it sounded too easy, too forgiving. She'd been conditioned to believe that real workouts had to hurt, had to push limits, had to leave you on the floor gasping. But maybe that was exactly the problem. She started with the lightest resistance band, the one that felt almost laughably easy, 5 minutes a day. Simple movements that focused on reconnecting her brain to muscles that had temporarily forgotten how to fire properly. Pelvic tilts, glute bridges, with a band around her thighs, standing rows, nothing Instagram-worthy, nothing that made her feel like she was crushing goals. But here's what nobody tells you about elastic bands. They provide constant tension throughout the entire movement. Unlike weights that rely on gravity, bands challenge your muscles differently, requiring control on both the extension and the return. For a postpartum body that needs to rebuild stability before strength, this is everything. What would you do in that moment when progress feels invisible? She laughed one morning, realizing she'd been expecting transformation to feel dramatic. But real recovery is measured in millimeters. The ability to lift her baby from the crib without bracing her entire core, walking upstairs without that strange pulling sensation, laughing without fear. These were the victories that mattered, and they were happening so gradually she almost missed them. Then came the setback, because there's always a setback. Week 4, she felt good enough to try a beginner HIIT class. It promised to be postpartum friendly, which apparently meant doing modified jumping jacks while her pelvic floor screamed objections she couldn't ignore. She spent the next 3 days back at square one, frustrated and leaking when she coughed. The shame was worse than the physical discomfort. Sometimes, we only understand our limits when we cross them. She had to redefine what progress meant. Not how fast she could go, but how sustainable she could make it. Not how much weight she could lift, but how well she could control the movement. The resistance bands became her allies because they scaled with her. She could increase tension by adjusting her grip or choosing a heavier band when she was ready. No ego, no comparison. Just her body, learning to be strong again on its own terms. Physiotherapists specializing in postpartum recovery emphasize something crucial. The core is not just your abs, it's a cylinder of muscles, including your diaphragm, pelvic floor, deep abdominals, and back muscles, all working together like an internal corset. When one part is compromised, the whole system compensates. Bands allow you to target these stabilizing muscles without the loading pressure that weights create. But here's what surprised her most. What surprised me most wasn't just how resistance bands improved my experience with postpartum strength training, but how everything started to feel different once I switched to the right method. I wasn't expecting such a clear change, and honestly, I tested it more than a few times before I figured out what really worked. My pelvic floor physio had recommended specific bands with different resistance levels, and the difference between generic ones and properly designed postpartum bands was night and day. This isn't a promotion, just sharing real results that made a noticeable difference for me. I'll leave the link below if you want to explore what I mean. The real transformation wasn't about getting her pre-baby body back. That phrase started to feel like a trap, a way of suggesting that her body's current state was somehow less than. Her body had grown and birthed a human. It had fed that human from its own resources. It deserved respect, not regression. Part of her grief process, and she hadn't expected there to be grief, was letting go of who she used to be physically. The runner who could do a half marathon on a random Saturday. The woman who could hold a plank for 3 minutes without thinking about it. That person still existed in some way, but she'd been transformed. And transformation isn't failure. By week 8, something shifted. Not dramatically, there was no moment of sudden clarity or movie-worthy montage, but she noticed she could play with her baby on the floor and get up without using her hands. She could carry the car seat without her lower back threatening mutiny. She could feel her abs engaging again, a sensation she'd forgotten was even missing. Researchers at Stanford found something similar. When routine meets meaning, consistency finally sticks. It's not about motivation. Motivation is fleeting and exhausting to maintain. It's about building micro-habits so small they don't require motivation. 5 minutes with bands while the baby napped, 10 minutes in the evening while her partner did bedtime. These tiny investments compounded in ways that 2-hour gym sessions never had. The breathing moments became as important as the movement itself. She'd start each session with diaphragmatic breathing, hand on her belly, feeling it rise and fall, reconnecting the breath to the core. This wasn't woo-woo wellness talk. This was functional rehabilitation. Breath regulation directly impacts pelvic floor function and core stability. Every exhale was an opportunity to engage those deep muscles. What surprised her most wasn't the physical changes, though those were real. It was the mental shift. She stopped viewing her body as something to fix and started seeing it as something to nurture. The difference sounds subtle, but it rewired everything. Exercise became a conversation with her body, instead of a battle against it. Then came the real test, her 6-month postpartum checkup. Her doctor cleared her for all activities, which felt both liberating and terrifying. She'd spent 6 months building this careful, sustainable practice. Would she abandon it now for the workouts she used to do? Would she fall back into the trap of measuring her worth by how hard she could push? Sometimes the hardest part of healing is trusting that you don't need to prove anything. She kept the bands, added some weights when it felt right. Tried a gentle yoga class that didn't make her pelvic floor panic, but the foundation, those quiet morning sessions with resistance bands, focusing on stability and control, that stayed because it worked. Not in a flashy before and after photo kind of way, but in the way that actually matters. She felt like herself again, a different version, sure, but herself. The mom community doesn't talk enough about the loneliness of postpartum recovery. Everyone shares the baby milestones, but rarely the moments where you're standing in your bedroom crying because your jeans don't fit and your back hurts and you haven't slept more than 3 consecutive hours in 4 months and your body feels like a stranger. Those moments are real, and they deserve space. Elastic bands didn't solve everything, nothing could, but they gave her agency in a season where so much felt out of control. They met her where she was, not where she thought she should be. They scaled with her progress without judgment. They cost less than a single physical therapy session but delivered principles her physio would approve of. By month 9, she was doing exercises that would have seemed impossible at month 2. Single-leg deadlifts with band resistance, Pallof presses for anti-artation core strength, banded squats with her baby in a carrier, because why not make it functional? Her diastasis had closed to less than 1 finger width. Her pelvic floor could handle a sneeze, a laugh, even a small jump. These weren't small victories. These were everything. But here's what she wanted other new moms to know. Your timeline is your timeline. Some women feel ready for impact exercise at 3 months. Others need a full year or more. Both are completely normal. The comparison trap is real, especially in the age of social media where everyone's highlight reel looks like a superhuman recovery. But healing isn't linear, and bodies don't follow influencer timelines. What would your recovery look like if you removed all the external pressure and listened only to your body? She thought about that question a lot. Realized she'd spent most of her life exercising for external validation, to look a certain way, to hit certain numbers, to prove something. Motherhood had stripped away the luxury of that superficial motivation. She didn't have time or energy for workouts that didn't serve her functionally. Every movement had to earn its place in her limited capacity. Somewhere between the failures and the quiet mornings, she found rhythm and peace. Not the toxic positivity kind of peace that ignores real struggle, but the hard one kind, that comes from doing difficult things slowly and with intention. Her body had taught her patience in a way nothing else could. When she looked in the mirror now, it wasn't her reflection that had changed, it was what she believed about herself. She saw strength in the softness that remained. She saw capability in the scars. She saw a woman who had built a life inside her body and was now rebuilding the body itself, one careful rep at a time. That woman deserved celebration, not criticism. The resistance bands sat in a basket by her bedroom door now, no longer intimidating or ignored. They were just tools, simple, effective, honest tools that had helped her reclaim something she thought was gone. And maybe that's the real story of postpartum recovery. It's not about going back. It's about moving forward into a version of yourself that honors everything you've been through. Tell us what part of this story resonated most and where you're watching from. Whether you're in those early postpartum weeks or years past them. Whether you're supporting someone through this journey or remembering your own, your experience matters. These conversations need to happen in the open, where we can hold space for the real, messy, beautiful truth of what it takes to heal. See you in the next video. Bye.